What is this?
All right, well, we don't have any guests or visitors perhaps, but let's welcome each other. Welcome to you from Ames Rotary, Naveda, London, or Gay Paris, from far off lands of the USA. We're glad that you are here today. Come back again whenever you're near. Join us and then we'll make it clear. Around the world you will always be. Welcome at Rotary. Lovely.
Hmm. Hmm.
There, how's this? Oh, good, okay. Well, hello, and yes, do throw something at me when it's time to be done, okay? I always, I always think of when I'm in front of a Rotary group, the first time that I spoke to a Rotary when I had become the deputy secretary. I was actually at my brother-in-law had asked me to come speak to his group, and I thought I was doing a pretty good job, you know. I hadn't done a lot of this speaking thing, and I got going, and pretty soon somebody got up and left, and then somebody else got up and left, and then 4 people got up and left, and I went, oh man, I must have, did I say something wrong? And I got done, and he says, oh, I forgot to tell you, we have a hard stop at 1 o'clock. Oh, okay. So I'm always very mindful when it comes to these that, you know, that there is a time frame that we're going to try to stick to. So please do hold me accountable to that. But well, it's great to be able to join you and to be able to talk about a few ag issues. And certainly there's no shortage of things to talk about these days. And I'll certainly give a few thoughts and some of the issues that I'm thinking about and that are in front of us, and then would love to take any questions that you've got. President Winterstein, you can't ask any questions. Or at least you should have submitted them in writing before, because, you know, you've got a next level that we could go to. Good to see you, Wendy. Well, so let's start with, you mentioned the weather. And of course, you know, I always say, hey, we're not in production. We just report on it. You know, state climatologist works for me. And in fact, he was just in my office this morning. We're talking drought. And we did see, unfortunately, an uptick in drought in the state of Iowa as of last week's reporting period. And so you've got Northwest Iowa, Western Iowa around Sioux City continues to really be a holdout from a drought standpoint. Now it has once again stretched up into Northwest Iowa, unfortunately. And I was actually on our farm up in Palo Alto County on Friday, and it is dry. Things look good, but it's dry. It's time for some rain. And but that's of course something that we're used to dealing with in agriculture. You know, I once did an interview with somebody not from Iowa, from the East Coast. This person wasn't particularly involved in agriculture, and the individual said, "Well, what if it doesn't rain?" I said, "Well, you know, that's bad. We'll lose the crop." She goes, "Well, what if it rains too much?" And I said, "Well, that would be bad too. We would lose the crop." And she just kind of goes, "Oh," and I said, "Well, but that's what we deal with, and so you control what you can, and you recognize that you can't control everything, and then you try to manage the risks around the things that you can't control, and that's farming in a nutshell." So of course, we're significantly better really across the state this year coming into the growing season versus last year, and that we did have moisture in the soil profile. Now, that didn't mean that we had cured the drought all over the state of Iowa, but we had moisture available for this crop. And the climatologist always reminds me that, you know, if you're only getting the amount of rain you're supposed to get, then you're not going to make up ground. You're just holding ground. The other thing, of course, is we have this heat dome that is camped out over, I looked this morning, from Florida to Canada. You've basically got the same weather going on here. Now, what can happen is you'll see potentially a snap back the other direction after this moves through. So we're all hopeful that maybe as we move into July that we'll see a little bit more moderate temperature, moderate weather as we get into tassel and pollination for the corn crop. You know, let me talk, I would say if you're on a farm, you're going to walk onto the farm and start a conversation, you're first going to talk about weather. So we just did that. Now, what do you think the second thing you're going to talk about? You're going to talk about the markets, right? And so we've got the market situation. Of course, commodity prices are high, are strong because of a lot of reasons, but demand for the things that we produce in a state like Iowa it's good, it's solid, it's strong all around the world. The things that we need or the things that people need are the things that we produce. However, with that also comes higher input prices as well. So everything that a farmer needs or agriculture needs to do the work of agriculture every day, energy, certainly fuel being top among those things, fertilizer prices, equipment, all of those things, costs are up. And so I get asked a lot about how we're doing this year from an economic standpoint. You know, if folks were able to get their inputs purchased in good shape last year, they're probably doing okay. This is maybe not the year that we're as concerned about, but as we look to next year, that's something that is concerning because, of course, all of the inputs are up, and we know that agriculture markets are cyclical, and at some point, we're going to see those commodity prices come down. So they'll come down, but input prices typically will tend to stay up and trail. And so that gap creates challenges. And so there's a lot of uncertainty in the ag space, especially as we look at the marketplace. I want to touch on a couple of maybe hot topics, things that we're very focused on, and then again, I'll open it for questions. High path avian influenza has been something that we've been dealing with this year, a foreign animal disease. In Iowa, of course, we're focused on things like African swine fever, foot and mouth disease, and high path avian influenza. And we did have an incident with that this year. Dramatically better than it was, though, in 2015 when we last had high path in the state of Iowa. And in 15, which still ranks as the largest foreign animal disease outbreak in U.S. history. And I'm glad to be able to say it's still the largest because we did not exceed that this year. In the state of Iowa, we had roughly 30 million birds were impacted that year. 77 farms were impacted. This year, we're looking more like 13 million birds and 19 sites. And so there were a lot of lessons that we learned from 2015. And we applied those. And I'm proud of the work that our team has done around that. And the response, I think the incident this time around was different. And that's a testament to our producers, the work that they did to protect their farms, but also to the USDA and our department, Iowa Department of Ag, for the work that we did to to be able to prevent the spread. And so by all means, ask me about those things as well, if you'd like. You know, you think back, of course, the last couple of years, I'm trying to look more forward these days and less backwards because I'm frankly tired of talking about COVID and the impact on agriculture. But, you know, it's just so real that we have to acknowledge and talk about these things. An unprecedented disruption to all of our lives and the marketplace and historic challenges that we had to face together. And so I'm always trying to think of what might be a few things, what might be a silver lining that comes out of what we experienced. You know, something that I think is we've got a convergence of a lot of folks wanting to shop local, right? More interest in knowing where your food comes from. And then, of course, in the last couple of years, we experienced this massive supply chain disruption, and frankly, we still are. And you say, doesn't it make sense to try to shorten the distance between the farm and the plate? Now, y'all know that the food that you ate today for lunch didn't just magically appear here, right? Somebody served it, somebody prepared it. It had to wind its way through a supply chain, and it took essential workers for that to happen. And almost everything that I saw on this plate started on a farm somewhere. And so I think I pray there's a better appreciation for the fact that food doesn't magically appear in the grocery store. It comes from somewhere. And shouldn't we be concerned and mindful of how those things happen? And so we have a convergence. And I bet if I asked everybody in this room to define what local foods is, you'd probably all have a different definition, and that's okay. The concept is more local, and more of a awareness of where food comes from. I think that's possibly one of those things that could come out of this that is positive for us. This past year, I asked the legislature we want to create a new state branded program, Choose Iowa, a program that's focused on promoting Iowa raised, Iowa made, Iowa grown agriculture, food and agriculture products. And I'm excited the legislature did act and pass that, and we will be launching that program in the coming months. I'm really excited about that. Again, I've traveled internationally. I've certainly traveled in this country. And you know, something I never really have to explain is that Iowa is an agriculture state. People kind of know that about us. And with it comes a tremendous brand for ag, right? Well, we can go a step further. It's not just about what we produce here. It's how we produce it. And how does it connect to consumers, whether that be in the form of renewable energy or the food on your plate? And so how do we continue to tell that whole story about what we do here in Iowa? So stay tuned for Choose Iowa. I'm really excited about what that can mean and the opportunity to be able to really expand that and give more opportunities for farmers to sell direct to consumers. Another area of major focus for us has been around meat processing and expanding the capacity of our small and mid-sized processors in the state of Iowa. Now, I assume there's somebody in here. Do you get meat from a meat locker somewhere? Anybody in this room? Yeah, a couple. I figured. Do you have a spot booked for next year yet? Can I get in with you? Oh, you know, it's about 50-50 whether I ask this question around, and I got people to go, no way. Others will go, well, come on in. I get you in. We did see, because of that meat processing supply chain disruption, and again, this convergence of issues, that we think there's a tremendous opportunity for Iowa's small meat lockers to be able to really expand and serve that market. And again, this was born out of something that was not positive at the time. It was a disruption to processing. Something I'm really proud of is that even in the height of COVID, when we saw a slowdown in processing, we had livestock producers saying, I just want to donate animals. I want to donate meat because I know that there are people in need and it can help. And, we started by processing some of those animals in small lockers across the state, but guess what? They got busy and we needed another solution. And the solution came in the form of the Iowa State University Meat Lab. And we put, I think it's over 2.5 million servings of Iowa grown pork, beef, and turkey through the meat lab out to the food banks and into the food pantries across the state. And I'm incredibly proud. And it's not because we did it, it's because of a whole group of folks got together and decided we are going to see this need and meet it. And I think that's a special thing that's going to continue to happen. But we're seeing lots of expansion in meat processing across the state, and that's a good thing. And then the other item I'm going to proactively mention here, and then I again be happy to take questions. That's around our work to improve water quality and soil health, and to expand soil conservation in the state of Iowa. You know, again, in a disrupted environment where all of our lives were turned upside down, there's a bright spot that happened. And again, it's kind of because it's a uniquely, you can kind of self-isolate and go do these things, but we set a record for conservation adoption in 2020. And again, we're coming in 2021, and 2022 will again be a record in terms of conservation adoption in the state of Iowa. And that's something that's saying a lot, because the state of Iowa has been working on conservation using state resources since the 1970s. So to say we're doing more today than ever before, that is real. And that is because of a lot of work on the part of a number of partners to do that. So we're focused on that. You heard me mention it before. Iowa's known for agriculture. We're usually known for the fact that we're #1 in pork, or #1 in corn, #2 in soybean. But something that we're really proud of is that's not just good enough to produce a lot of something. We're also proud of how we are producing those things, and with sustainability in mind, and with water quality and soil health in mind, we are focused on those things. And of course, I have to mention the fact, being in Ames, that a lot of the science, the basic science, the important work that gets done from a technical standpoint is right this way, to the north, right? It's right here in town, Iowa State University, the absolute epitome of what a land-grant university is supposed to be. And they live it out, and there's a lot to be proud of there. So that's my kind of high level run over a whole bunch of things, and there's a whole bunch of things I didn't talk about. So by all means, please ask me questions, and I'd be happy to answer. Go ahead. Yeah, well, I can't give you the specific on percentages. Sure. Talk about soil loss, topsoil loss percentages over the last few years, what we're going to do going into the future to address that. So I can't give you percentages, but you know, what I always start this conversation with is that, you know, we've got an economy in Iowa that's built on agriculture, and our agriculture is built on the soil that we have, and it is our #1 natural resource in the state. It drives all of that productivity, you know, to grow those millions of acres of corn and soybean, is because we have the landscape that we do, and the water that we have, the rainfall that we usually have. So it is the basis of what we do. So to not have a long view of that is dangerous. And so we've got to make sure that we're thinking about that well into the future. So, you know, when it comes to our efforts around conservation, we've got, again, this long history going back to the Dust Bowl era and USDA, NRCS working in the state of Iowa. We have soil conservation districts in the state of Iowa, 90 plus years old. In the 1970s, the state of Iowa becomes the first state in the nation to use state appropriations for soil conservation. And then 9 years ago now, heading into the 10th year, we began implementing Iowa's nutrient reduction strategy, which is all about trying to, again, reduce nutrient loss off of our landscape. Something that's very important about that strategy, the way that we've approached it in the state of Iowa, is we didn't say we've got an ag strategy and an everything else strategy. We have a strategy that includes Iowa's entire landscape, which includes people, which includes cities, which includes urban and rural, point and non-point. And that's important to have all of that together in a strategy with a scientific underpinning that knows that we can go out and say, when we implement this practice, cover crops, no-till, or an urban conservation project, that it has a corresponding nutrient reduction, that the science shows that we can count on that. And so that's the basis of our strategy. I think you're particularly around soil health now. This is becoming a concept that's relatively new in the last few years, that folks are thinking a lot about, not just keeping soil in place, not just worrying about the water that's leaving the landscape, but also what are we doing to actually improve soil health? Because if you have healthy soil, you've got productive soils. And so that's where we always are mindful of that our strategy doesn't have just a single silver bullet, right? You can't just say if we did this one thing, it would solve everything. So a strategy's got to have multiple options for farmers and landowners depending on the landscape, which is diverse from north to south and east to west. But when it comes particularly to soil health, I think things like cover crops, no-till, reduced tillage, those types of things are critically important to getting to where we need to go. And now, sort of the exciting thing that a lot of folks are talking about, and frankly, there's a lot of questions about it too, and that's around carbon and how do you sequester carbon into the soil? How do you lower the carbon intensity of anything that we produce in agriculture? And what is that connection with soil health? One example, had a group in my office, we're doing a project with them, and it's all about, it's compensating farmers for outcomes based on practices that they install in their fields. Typically, we do cost share. If you do cost share, I'm going to pay you X number of dollars per acre to do a certain practice. This is different. This says, we're going to look at your field. We're going to take all the practices that you implement, whatever you choose, and then we're going to assign an outcome to that the science tells us what's happening. And that's what you're being compensated for, not the adoption of the practice. And your field's different than your field is different than your field. And so the outcome is different. That's exciting. And it's putting us in a different direction. And it's getting, I think, people thinking more comprehensively about the farm, not just on a one practice at one point in time, but all of the things that I can be doing. Sorry, long answer, but that's generally I think there's a lot of good things happening there and a lot of awareness around soil health. And by the way, resiliency in the face of extreme weather too, right? If you want to have a crop that's more resilient in the face of too much rain or not enough rain, then you've got to have healthy soil, healthy roots. Great question. Yes. Yes. Yes, so the question is around workforce, the challenge around workforce, and how does that workforce shortage impact family farms and agriculture? Well, I will tell you that as I travel the state and I visit businesses, farms, I did a roundtable at a bank in southwest Iowa late last week, was at an ethanol plant later that day. I was at a brewery even later in the day. You should always visit the brewery. We figured out that you can't visit the brewery at 10 a.m. You got to visit the brewery at 3 p.m. on a Thursday. That's better. But in each of those visits, I'm asking questions. I'm love to hear from folks. And when I'm particularly in a business setting, the number one issue is workforce. And I have been amazed throughout the last couple of years that even in the face of unprecedented market disruption, supply chain disruptions, everything's standing on its head. Almost every business I've been in has said, we'd be growing right now if we had the people to do it. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that an amazing thing? We'd be growing right now. There's more demand for what we do than what we can supply because we don't have the people to meet that demand. So that is impacting broadly our economy, but certainly impacting agriculture and farms as well. So, we think about it again. I love. I sort of say if I'm sitting in front of a company, I say, "You're having workforce challenges." Well, you're the only one. If you would just fix one thing, you'd be solved. No, it's not that way, is it? There are many things. There's 17 things. There's not one thing that a company can do. But it is a whole host of things around work, especially out in rural communities in our state. Housing, childcare, those are top issues that you don't solve tomorrow, and they've got a longer lead time. I try to think near, mid, and long term in this sense. Near term, we do have, and we need more Iowans working, and we need more Iowans. And some of that is going to need to come from and continue to come from foreign-born labor, ag visa programs that need to be predictable. They need to be timely, And that's something that has to be done at the federal level. I am anxious for and wish that we could see, I believe, that if you put a bill related to ag worker visa on the floor of the House, U.S. House and the U.S. Senate, and you left it alone, you left it clean, that you'd see passage of a bill like that. I think there's enough support on both sides of the aisle and regionally across the country. But of course, immediately when you put that issue in a political environment, then you end up with stuff attached to from both sides. And so I'm not, frankly, that optimistic about dramatic change there, but there should be. And we need to see progress in that sense. Midterm, well, there's all about training and making sure you're getting people matched up with the opportunities that exist. It's a 4-year degree here. It's an advanced degree here. It's a community college certificate program. It's an apprenticeship. All of the above. We need that space to be very active and meeting the needs of employers that are out there. And then, of course, the longer term is we've got to flat out get more folks aware of the opportunities that exist for careers in agriculture. And that includes a whole bunch of folks that didn't grow up on farms, right? And so that's a longer play that we need to be very concerned about and be very intentional about, is trying to get more ag subject matter in front of students throughout their educational experience. So long answer, but I think the short answer was yes, it's impacting, and it's the number one challenge. Having more kids would be a good thing, yes. Although I'm the father of 3 boys, 2 of whom are teenagers, and do you know what that grocery bill is doing right now? Holy smokes. We feed them, and 25 minutes later, somebody's standing at the pantry going, is there anything to eat? What did you just do? Yes, sir. Comments related to the CO2 pipelines. What I will say, I'll say a couple things. And one, I at the outset, I have no regulatory role in that process as the Department of Ag or the Secretary of Ag. And 2, I can't explain or defend the actions of the various companies. They have to represent themselves. I look at it this way: CO2 capture, lowering the carbon intensity of the things that we produce, whether it's ethanol, a T-bone steak, or bio-based plastics, whatever it is that we produce in ag, we have an opportunity to lower the carbon intensity of that, and that we think can also generate some revenue potentially for farmers as well. So that, I think, is real, and there's an opportunity there. So would ethanol benefit from lowering the carbon intensity score of a gallon of ethanol? Yes. Would there be a premium? Could that market expand? Yes, I believe that's all true. So, from a technical standpoint, can you capture, sequester, put CO2 in a pipeline and move it? Yes, you can. Now, what comes to the question is usually revolving around, should we build a pipeline, and what should be the role of government in that? When I've had conversations with each of the companies, and I've expressed my desire and encouraged them that we should see that we want this to be done on a voluntary basis, where they are compensating landowners and answering their questions and satisfying their questions about what would happen to land. And I'm also mindful of the fact that we have a lot of pipelines running across the state of Iowa. This is not a new concept, but if it's your farm, it's your land, that is different, and it is personal. And so what I would continue to encourage folks is, we're in the process, right? There's a process that's playing out right now where companies are trying to secure these easements, and we will see whether they can do deals that are acceptable to producers or not. Yes, Mike. Hey, you interviewed me a couple of weeks ago. I say I should be asking you questions. We had a chance to be I was on Mike's panel during World Pork Expo. Yeah. Yeah, good question. What would it look like to have African swine fever first 24, 48 hours? I am not in a mindset that I say that it is inevitable that we will have African swine fever in the United States. I think and don't hear me being overconfident. Don't hear me being arrogant or anything like that. What I say is, if we continue to do the right things from keep it out of the United States, build a wall, so to speak, in terms of detecting it and keeping it out, the things that could carry it. Those are the types of things we need to be thinking about. We also need to go play offense. So when we know that African swine fever is present somewhere, like in the Dominican Republic and Haiti, which are not that far off of in the Western Hemisphere for the first time since 1980, we ought to go play offense there and try to contain it. The concept being, if there's less of that virus to move around, you've just knocked down the likelihood that it does move. If you let that plume and that virus replicate and exist, the chances of it moving are greater. And so play offense, go try to help deal with it where you can. And we actually lived that out here in Iowa. After it was detected in the Dominican Republic, I called some of our contacts, a great Iowa State alum in particular, and said, what can we do to help? I'll send people to the DR if that's what it takes. They appreciated the offer. And in fact, this winter, they did call and invite the state veterinarian, the Iowa State veterinarian, to travel with them. He spent 3 weeks in the Dominican helping that team respond. We figure that's good experience for him to have and for us to have. And again, it also us living out the fact that we're trying to go help in ways that we can. So contain it where it is, stamp it out where it is, keep it out of the United States. And then we say the next line of defense is for you on your farm, keep it off your farm. The thing that's going to be very challenging, and it is in any disease outbreak, is you have to try to figure out where it is. Where is it, and can you contain it? Well, if you can't go sample, if you don't have the ability to go sample, get samples run quickly, and have a sense of where things are, so you know what you're dealing with. That is one of the greatest challenges for us, is to try to detect where it is. And I guess the second piece would be, and if that's the day that everybody starts to think about biosecurity, it's too late. So you can't do those things on day one or day two. You have to be thinking about it now. Of course, when it comes to diagnostics and the samples that get run, we have a huge advantage in that we have an Iowa State University vet diagnostic lab. I can't tell you how important it is when we have questions about what we're dealing with, when we're running samples somewhere to have testing done. We put them in a car and drive them to Ames. We don't put them on a plane and fly them to New York. We drive them to Ames. We can find out within hours what we're dealing with, and we know that the results are something that we can act on. So that project that's happening on the south side of the campus here that you can see so nice from Highway 30 is one of perhaps the most important pieces of infrastructure for the livestock industry in the state of Iowa, is the vet diagnostic lab. And we got one part of it funded. It needs to be completed, but it's a beautiful project. It's very, very well done. How am I doing on time? Okay. Yes, sir. Not really. Oh, sure. Good question. So I don't know how you recapture that. Mediterranean diet, how do we diversify, or would there be an opportunity to diversify? Some of the things called for in the Mediterranean diet are things that we don't produce here. Look, when it comes to nutrition, of course, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. I think balance is probably one of the most important things that I learned from, over the years. And so I think it's important to remember that. Look, I'll start at high level. And this is a notion that, you know, should we, to what extent should we get in and try to direct who's raising what in the state of Iowa, right? You know, I trust farmers to understand the marketplace and understand that we do some things really well here, and there's reasons for that. And so I don't expect us to significantly, you know, I don't think you're going to see a change in millions of acres of, you know, away from corn and soybeans. There's a reason that we do that here. And there's a very important need for a market for those products. That said, I do think there's, first of all, there is diversity in Iowa's agriculture. And yes, exactly what Choose Iowa is intended to be is to create even more market opportunities or to help support farmers who choose to supply that marketplace. Again, I think you've got this convergence of consumers interested in that and wanting to know where food comes from. And if that demand is there, and if we can help generate more demand and more awareness that those things can be produced in Iowa, then I think you can get to where, yes, you see those opportunities to that build. I think one of the other, you talk about the next generation, of course, it is hard and it's never been easy to get into farming. It's never been easy to get into farming. It wasn't easy at any time in our history. It's not easy today. And I do think that as we think about that next generation, I've met with a lot of young farmers. I should take that back. Beginning young and small farmers. You don't have to be young to be a beginning farmer. Who you may not be able to get on 1,000 acres, but you can get on 10. And you can start looking at a high margin, high value crop that does have a shorter supply chain direct to consumer. And those, I think, are real opportunities that folks can look at to start generating some revenue and then even grow from there. So yes, those are things that we're interested in, but ultimately, what do consumers want? And then is there a chance to supply that? So I do think that there's an opportunity for that here. Absolutely. Yes, sir. Yes. Hypoxia task force. I can't, using reverse osmosis on the landscape. So I can't specifically address that, but the concept is that you're driving at, I think, is solid, which is, and you're seeing us, again, it is not a one size fits all strategy in that different operations have different needs and different capabilities, and the landscape is different. What we do like is trying to pair management practices in a field. So things that a farmer can do in their field, cover crops, no-till, strip-till, nutrient management, those types of things, versus edge of field practices, which really don't have an agronomic impact or benefit at all, but they are things that literally are at the edge of a field, like a wetland, a bioreactor, saturated buffer, something that's intercepting tile lines and treating water, so to speak, at that point so that then you are discharging that into streams. We think we need both. But what I like about the latter is that's infrastructure. A wetland is something that we design for 150-year lifespan. You design it, you construct it, you build it, and it does its job every single day of the year. Doesn't, regardless of what's happening with the weather. And so that, in terms of those being nitrate treatment wetlands, we think that's a concept that does work. So anything that gets to that point that you're talking about of let's treat more water and do it more efficiently, those are things that we're very interested in. Yes, sir. Yeah. Interesting. Sure. Yep. Yep. Yeah. So diversity in agriculture, some examples of places where we grew things and how do we address the workforce. So to the latter part of the question, so I'm separately elected here. So I think, so, and as secretary, and I think I gave I think a pretty good overview of what I think from a visa program is we need more Iowans, we need more people working here, and that has to include being welcoming of people from outside of the United States. So, I mean, I'm representing myself in that sense. On that point, that's why I made that point is we have a challenge around that. You can't necessarily do that kind of agriculture unless you have, let's just say it this way, you got to have workforce. There's just have to have it. You can mechanize some of that and there's pieces of that, but you've got to have the workforce appropriate to do that. Again, in terms of what's a role for government in trying to incentivize that, I think what we can do is try to, again, the concept of creating an umbrella that folks can fit under to say, we can promote Iowa grown, Iowa raised, Iowa made products, and lots of things can fit underneath of that. We're not trying to tell people what they need to do, but if you can see the opportunity that exists, if you can see the demand from consumers, then there's an opportunity there. So that there, and then there's research that needs to be done on some of those pieces. There's some production that we used to have in the state of Iowa that we don't anymore. And so, things around even small grains, we talk about cover crops and we don't grow wheat and oats like we used to, but we can again in some settings. And I think there's work that needs to be done around breeding and those types of things as we look to bring those crops back into the state of Iowa. The other piece that we did discover when we were doing a task force on local foods and particularly around farm to school. So, you can sit here and say, well, here's the types of things that I think it'd be great if we could put locally grown into a school system. The reality is that if you're a food service director and you're trying to feed several hundred children a day and you've got a shortage of workforce as well, you say, okay, I want to buy local, but it needs to show up here this way. We don't have the ability to process food, or we'd love to buy local meat, but we can't have 500 pounds of 1 pound hamburger packages show up here because we don't have time to thaw that out and deal with it. But if it comes in bulk and it's fresh, then we can. And so some of this gets down to flat out awareness of here's what the marketplace is asking for and how it wants it. And here's the opportunity to produce it. And so those are things that I think we can do is try to, particularly as it relates to school, farm to school, is are we just aware of what, we need carrots and we need them in this quantity prepared this way. We need potatoes done this way. Those are things that we can do collectively to help steer folks into that marketplace. And we've got a good partner here on that local foods piece in particular with Extension, has done a lot of work for many years in this space. And so they're a natural partner for us. All right. Interesting. So question around fertilizer prices, availability, and urine capture. Was it the Times? I'll have to look at that. Not specifically around that. However, I do think that in an environment where you've got high prices, high input prices, and even now some availability concerns about just where do things come from and are they going to be available and at what cost, it necessitates looking at diversity in that, how do we produce it? What are the tools that we use? We think about, got a lot of livestock in the state of Iowa. We use a lot of manure as a crop nutrient. I think there's gonna be a lot of folks who look at that in new ways and say, that has incredible value. I need to know more about what's in that from a from a nutrient standpoint, and then are we applying it with precision tools? And I think we'll get even better at placing nutrients right where they need to be at the right time, in the right place, and the right amount because of the price and availability. And then we should be looking at other sources as well. I'll have to look that one up. Thank you. Thanks. All right, feels like we're getting close here. Back here. Yeah. Very good question. So talking about outcomes, paying for outcomes related to conservation, how can it be done? What's the baseline, and what about the people to ensure that? Great question. You've touched on, frankly, some of the great challenges here. So on this front, there are issues around how do you track, and then how do you model the outcomes? I'm reminded of somebody telling me once that all models are wrong. Some are more useful than others, right? Maynard, do I have that about right? All models are wrong. Some are more useful than others. But yeah, of course, are you populating those models with the best available science? I think that's where, again, we need to make sure that we're doing world-class level work on understanding how when we grow things in the state of Iowa, what is that, what's the actual energy usage? What's the actual water? What is the current state of play? And do we actually understand that? And are the models reflecting that? I think that's one piece. Two is, how do you measure and then account for all those credits and those outcomes that you're looking for? That is also not entirely established. And we need to set some standards around that. And that is a role for government. Whether it's the state level or at the national level, some entity needs to be looking at how do you ensure, at least as a watchdog, that that when people enter credits into a system, that they're not being double counted in those types of things, and that you can follow a product. Let's just take a can of Coca-Cola sitting on a Walmart store shelf. Can you take that can and track back all of its ingredients all the way back to the beginning of the supply chain? And can you apply then the credit and perhaps the revenue that should be associated with the action taken? We're not there yet, not by a long shot. And so those are things that need to be looked at. And then your question around, do we have the workforce to be able to go out and verify and measure? No. I mean, that's not how we're arranged today. That's why we're testing some of these things to say, do we, right now the bulk of what we do is through a traditional cost share model. We pay X amount for a certain practice. If we're going to see a movement more towards this paying for outcomes and credits and establishing a market, then we have to really look at a wholesale change in how we do things. So for us at the state of Iowa right now, we're testing, trying, and demonstrating that. And frankly, we'll see how that goes. But you've just asked, I think, some of the very pertinent questions that will need to be addressed here. I always tell folks, if you feel like you've been left behind in this carbon conversation, don't think that way. You haven't. It's happening right now. It's not like the train has left the station and there's no way to catch up. Not true. We're creating this future right now, and there's still some very researchable questions that need to be looked at. All right, the big hook is out. Thank you. I expected that there would be some pretty good questions from this group, and you didn't disappoint. Thank you. And by all means, if you have a thought, you have a question that you didn't get a chance to, please do reach out. I would love to hear from you if you've got thoughts. I always appreciate thoughts about what you think we could be doing better or need to be thinking about. I welcome that. Or if you flat out just have a question for the Department of Ag, I would very much appreciate the opportunity to answer that. So thanks again. Thanks for the invitation to be here. And thank you. I should have started this way, but I'm always reminded as you go through the business meeting at Rotary that you do some amazing things and have an impact on the community locally, of course, but also Rotary International does some amazing things from a humanitarian standpoint too. So thanks for being a part of that here.
Well, Mike, I never realized your job was so easy. Yeah. We do have a request, and that's for your autograph. We are sponsors for Raising Readers, and at a well baby checkup when the child is 2, they will be presented with a book with your autograph on it. And in this case, it's Whose Ears Are These? So it's always fun. So I'll get that from you in just a moment. Thank you. Wow. Wendy, I had no idea what the Iowa State University did. Thank you. Appreciate everybody being here. As a final saying, and this works for celebration of June 19th, but also Rotary, and specifically also today a quote. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Martin Luther King. With that, let us say the 4-way test. The things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendship? Will it be better to all? Thank you.